Hi, welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and this is the Dust Warfare Bootcamp. In the next series of videos, I'm going to teach you how to play the tabletop miniatures game Dust Warfare by Fantasy Flight Games. Now, originally, there was the game Dust Tactics, and although it came with lots of miniatures, this was played more as your traditional board game style. It took place on a board with a gridded surface. But then they released the book Dust Warfare, and this allowed you to take the miniatures from Dust Tactics, strip away all the trappings of a board game, and instead play the game on open terrain of your own creation. Now, if you've never played a miniatures game before, then I'm really hopeful that this series will introduce that aspect of the hobby to you. And if you are a seasoned miniatures player, then hopefully you'll learn a little bit about the Dust universe, and it'll help you decide whether or not this game would be a good fit for you. Now, they've already made expansions for this core rulebook. There's additional books you can get. Introduces rules for air fighting and additional factions, as well as campaign play. But over the next series of videos, I'm going to teach you how to play the complete core rulebook system. When we come back, we'll get right into it. In this episode, I'm going to go over what you need to get started playing, as well as tell you a little bit of the background story to the Dust universe. Now to start, you're going to need at least 2 players. And then you're also going to need a playing surface, like the table that I have here. It's also really advisable that you have some terrain elements, some walls, some buildings, things to move around. It gives you some tactical options when you're playing, and of course it also looks good. Now, when you're first getting started in a miniatures game, you may not have some of those elements, and they can be expensive when you go to buy them, but there are some cheap alternatives. For myself, when I was getting started, I just used felt. Now, not only was this inexpensive to make, but as you can probably tell by looking at it, it didn't take me a lot of time either, which can be nice when you want to get right into the gameplay. And of course, this is very portable. You can roll it right up and take it wherever you want. But it has everything that I need. I have some water elements here. I have some muddy spots for difficult terrain. I imagine these as being maybe a story or 2-story high buildings. And then these are walls here. Again, you have to use your imagination, but I imagine these being about 1 inch high, and therefore I could get my miniatures to run up and hide behind them, provides a little bit of cover. And of course, it's very easy to move the felt around and create a very different looking battlefield. Now, when you're ready to get a little more sophisticated with your battlefield, there are several options. Of course, you can build your own. There's many videos on YouTube to give you some instruction on how to do that, if that's your interest. Or you can pick some up, like I did here. I got these from the TerrainGuy. I'll put a link to his website in the description of this video. What I liked about these, you can see they got puzzle piece edges. So you can snap several of them together to make your gaming space as big or as little as you need to. And of course, you can then break it down and pack it away a little bit easier as well. Looking at the surface of these, you can tell they're nice and textured, have kind of a grass and dirt look, perfect for a battlefield. There are also some official Dust buildings and accessories that you can pick up, like I have here. These come in Dust Tactics expansions, so you kind of think about it. When you're buying material for Dust Warfare, you're also expanding your Dust Tactics collection if that's a game you end up enjoying as well. As you can see, I have some tank traps, I have some walls set up, and then some broken down buildings. I also picked up some generic tabletop accessories, like some more walls, some barrels. These things provide not just some tactical elements to move around and hide behind, but they add a little bit of character to the table as well. I also grabbed this hill here. This I also got from the TerrainGuy. You can see the texture of it matches the same as my tabletop playing area. I also wanted to add a little bit of foliage to my gaming space, so I picked up these trees at a hobby store. Normally these would go with a train set. I glued them to a bit of a base here. That way they don't tip over as easily and I can move them around a bit. I probably should have painted the base green to make it look like grass, but you have to decide for yourself how much time you want to put into the hobby aspect of this and how much into the actual gaming. If you do want to put a little bit more time into the hobby aspect, you can build your own buildings. This is a very simple and easy building that I put together using the video instruction by a gentleman named Viv. There's a great little series. He has a web show called Rubbish In, Rubbish Out. I'll put a link to it in the show notes below. Next, you're going to need to pick up some tape measures. I recommend at least 2, 1 for each player. And I really like these smaller ones because it just allows you to measure through some tight spaces, which you're sometimes going to have to do. They recommend having 12 Dust combat dice. The combat dice have several blank sides and then 2 hit sides. If you don't have the custom ones, you can use regular 6-sided dice, and then 5s and 6s are the hits. I really like the custom dice though, so I ordered several extras just so both players could have a nice pool to draw from when rolling. The game also uses counters to keep track of things, and the book has some that you can photocopy. But I like using colored beads, and I've found that I've been able to get away with having these white, black, red, and blue colored beads that I got from a local craft store. We'll see more how these are used later. And of course, there are the miniatures. The core book focuses on two of the armies, the Axis and the Allies, so you'll want some of each. Now, if you buy the Dust Tactics starter set, you'll get several models and probably the best bang for your buck. But the armies you get there, which go well with a Dust Tactics game, may not be as sufficient to fill out two balanced armies for Dust Warfare. So you may wish to build your army by picking up a few extra models or just building them straight from the several smaller boxed options that there are available. We'll talk a lot more about how to build your own army in a later episode and give some tips for starting force options, but for now, it's enough to know that you need some miniatures. One thing to keep in mind is this is a miniatures game. That means there's some complexity to it, and all of these units have individual stats for their defense, for their health, for their movement. They have special abilities. Those special abilities have rules. They have weapons. Some of those weapons have special rules, and of course lots of stats for them as well. And I'm the kind of person, I don't want to have to flip through a rule book to remind myself of what all of these different stats are. So I created these unit cards. And so these unit cards contain all that information. So you can have these laying out in front of you when you're playing the game to help remind you of what you can do and what you can't do. I shared these on the Board Game Geek forums. I shared them on the Fantasy Flight Games forums. And so people have taken the template that I provided, and now they're releasing updated stat sheets for the new models that are being created. So if Fantasy Flight Games ever releases official ones, I'll gladly snap them up. But until then, you have these to use if you want. I'll put a link to them in the description below. Something else to keep in mind, when you buy Dust Tactics models, you also get unit cards. But these are for Dust Tactics only. They will not help you when you're playing Dust Warfare. Now, along with the gaming, of course, there is a hobby element to this. You can spend a lot of time if you want collecting, assembling, customizing, and painting your miniatures. Now, some of my miniatures have been painted, and I had these done by commission through Miniature Modeler. I'll put a link to them in the YouTube description below. I also have a friend, Cole Fisher, in the UK, who's painted up a bunch of miniatures for me in the past as well. These guys are fantastic. They do a great job, and it's a nice quick way to get your army painted if you have a little extra money to spend and you don't really have the time. Or maybe the talent. Dust Warfare, however, its miniatures come pre-assembled, so no sticky gluing that you have to worry about, and the models come pre-primed. That means all the Allied forces come pre-primed in green and the Axis in gray. So no trouble telling your forces apart on the table. And if you do want to start painting them, well, that's one less step you have to do because they already do come primed. Now, I know we want to jump right into the gameplay and see how the game works. We're going to save that for the next episode. For now, I'd like to give you a little bit of the backstory to this Dust universe that was created by Paolo Parente. In this universe, we are on an Earth very similar to our own, but also very different. It's the year 1947, and World War II has raged for nearly a decade, spreading to every continent on the planet. The war itself has taken on a very different form than the one we know from our own history. Most notably, it changed when the German forces discovered a crashed alien spaceship in Antarctica and used a newly discovered mineral to create giant walking robots that allowed them to stymie the Allied offensive and then crush the Russians in Stalingrad, turning the war in their favor. At a victory parade in Berlin, Adolf was assassinated, sending the Axis forces into chaos until they rebuilt themselves, cleansed of any Nazi element. Eventually, the Allies stole the technology from the Axis by capturing one of their walking tanks and created walking tanks of their own. Russia later separated from the Allies and formed the Sino-Soviet Union with China, also known as the SSU, the third playable faction, once you get some of the expansions. We're going to end things here, but in the next episode, we're going to dive right into the gameplay. I also wanted to mention, though, if you're interested in picking up some Dust models, please check out my friend Dan at the Discount Game Store. Really nice guy. I love supporting his business. He's moved so much stock, it's very difficult for him to keep all of his quantities up to date, but he assures me he has several copies of everything in the line, except for the main starter set. He's working on getting some of those in. You should definitely contact him through email. Let him know what you're interested in getting, and he'll be able to give you a great rate on shipping. If you're in the U.S., it's going to be free shipping. If you're outside the U.S., unfortunately, because of UPS rate increases, he's had to charge a little bit for the shipping, but again, it's very little, and his prices are already very good. Our friend Lewis over at the World of Fantasy Games in the UK is another great option as well. He doesn't stock as much Dust material, but if you contact him, he may be able to get something in for you and help you save on that long-distance shipping if you were ordering from over here in the US or Canada. Listen, I hope you enjoyed this introductory look at Dust Warfare.